Hello everybody, we are back doing a little bit more scheming for our mTDI build. I've got the thing apart and I think we're just about ready to get started on some things, but I would like to confirm the stroke that we have for the metering sleeve. I drew a little picture of it right here. Basically all the complicated crap around the pump, that all is just move this little sleeve up and down the plunger, and that sleeve will either expose or cover this little puka. So when the sleeve is covering the hole, it's full throttle. The engine is going as fast as it can. It's holding onto all of its fuel and dumping it into the cylinders. And when it's open, then it's all being relieved. And all that's controlled by a lever. This is an incredible generalization. But when I say stroke, for the sake of this video, that's what I mean. I'm looking for this stroke of this metering sleeve. Now, when you look online, there's a lot of information about certain combinations of these pumps, but I kind of have an uncommon one. And I think the best way to illustrate that is with this lineage. So here, we start off in the Neolithic era of 1979. These dates might be wrong for your particular country, but this is the way it is in the States. We have a 1.5 diesel. That's the way this thing starts. Then we move to the 1.6 diesel and turbo diesel. And then in the Mark III B4 era, we have this little slew of different kinds of injection pumps. And then we get over to the Mark IV era, and it's just the ALH. Again, this might be different, but there's a lot of information here on this mechanical pump being made to fit that engine. And that makes sense because a lot of people want the larger diameter main shaft of the AAZ, and they want to drop it into the ALH, the engine that has the most aftermarket support. It's a very long-lived engine of all of these. But me, what I'm doing is I'm trying to drop this mechanical pump here. Seems simple enough, but there are some differences. Again, talking about the stroke for the AAZ, it's supposedly 1.6, and the ALH is supposedly 2.6. And I haven't been able to find any information about the stroke on the two TDIs that I have. It would be really nice if they happen to line up, because the 1.6D is pretty famous for its tuning capability. You can just crank those things open and just pour tons of fuel into them. And since the AAZ and the 1Z are of the same generation, very similar, you could probably build one of these engines in the other. I'm hoping that its pump has a similar, shorter stroke. But that's what I'm going to find out today. I'm actually recording this after the fact. So that is what I found out today. This is all a part of my big thing on the internet of trust but verify. So if you want to just trust me, the 1.6 TD, that is 1.6, 1.7, and the 1Z is 2.6. So wouldn't you know it, the internet was correct. But this is one of those things that's really worth double checking for yourself. And if you stick with me, I'll show you how we did it. So this bad boy up here, with all the wires coming out of it, that's what moves our collar back and forth that I mentioned before along the plunger. The mechanical one is a lot more complicated, but this one is just a bunch of electronics, and down goes a finger, and the finger moves it from side to side. I think it's like a shipper shaft, but it's kind of hard to say. People don't really repair these electric positioners. They just throw them out or get something new. So we're going to be learning here. First thing we're going to do is grab one of these tiny 7.5 3-points. It should come with the specialty tools kit. Now it's time to just pull that up. So here we go. This is our, I don't know if the term is right, shipper shaft. So this rotates. I don't know if you can see down in there. But as that rotates, it moves the collar. And that's what relieves our pressure in there. So somewhere in this thing is mechanical stops. So we're gonna go through, we're gonna rip it apart. We're gonna find the mechanical stop one way or the other. And that should tell us our stroke. You know, if I was smart, I would have cleaned this thing. I'm realizing it's going to make a mess on my workbench. Okay, these other ones don't have washers for whatever reason. There's a cover, and here's some garbage underneath. I think those are our mechanical stops. Click, click. Okay, so the number that online said was 2.7 millimeters. I got my 2 millimeters of preload on this thing. Let's just run it through, see what we get. 1, 2, 2.7. One more time for good luck. 1, 2.7. Looks about right. Okay, so I got our depth gauge here. This is not the this is not my 1.6 pump. This is my practice D24 pump that I took apart in another video. But I got this thing set up and I'm going to mess with it and see if I can't get the fulcrum lever to go back and forth and see what kind of stroke this thing has. So putting this thing together, I stuck back in the fulcrum lever, the governor, and this top assembly and lever. I didn't mess with any of the knobs. So having messed with none of the knobs, this should be theoretically what the stock stroke is. I got my 2 millimeters of preload, like I said, and let's see what she got. 1, 2, 2.7. Okay, how awesome would that be if whatever's in here just so happens to be exactly what I need for the TDI. I don't know if this is in the fulcrum lever or not, or if this is just a combination of the parameters of like the governor, this fuel screw and all that stuff, and the actual stroke of this lever. If that's what's getting me my 2.7, it has something to do with it, because I mean this does bump up against the fulcrum lever and so does the governor. All right, so there you could see that's the end of our little fulcrum lever. That's what would be actually on the metering sleeve. You can't see the gauge, but I can. And it's showing, again, 2.7. Here's our 1.6 TD set up just like the other stuff. And I did take the lever out of the LDA because that is a stroke limiter. So this should be our maximum stroke we got here. So we get about 0.5 out of that, 0.5 mil. But if I reach in and I grab the fulcrum lever, 1.65, 1.7. See, once it's there and I pull it, this doesn't make a difference. So I messed around with this a little bit, I just backed off the fuel screw a little bit, a couple turns, and now we got our 1, 2, 2.6-ish stroke that we were looking for. And I mean, that's the whole point of modifying that fulcrum lever, is to get 2.6. I think what I'm doing though here is I'm backing off the fuel, so I'm actually doing the opposite of what I want. Even though I have the right stroke, my starting point is less fuel. So I got to figure out a way to do this in the opposite way, which I think will come down to modifying that fulcrum lever. I think at the very least, I learned a few things, and even if I do have to modify the lever, I think this setup is pretty good. Learned how to do this, figure out the stroke, so I don't have to put the whole thing together and just figure it out then. So there we go. There is our scientific process, scientific process for how we figured out the stroke on all of our respective pumps. I should note that over here, my D24 was also 2.6. I did a little bit of messing around with that D24 and my hybrid pump. I was really hoping that there would be like a combination of parts where I would not have to modify the fulcrum lever, but that was a pipe dream. I've had a couple of weeks to mess around with these and it's just not going to happen. So up next, we're going to be figuring out how to modify this fulcrum lever, but I hope this was informative to you. It was informative to me, and have a good one. Shoots.